Welcome back to Woven in Time. Luther's Woven in Time by Dugan. Um, I've been talking about grandparents, and I got one more to go, so I guess I'll talk about my Maw Maw Seawell today. Um, I probably know less about my Maw Maw Seawell for lots of different reasons. So I'll begin with she was she never learned to read or write. She made her mark. Her signature was an X, and she never counted money. Um, I don't know. I know very little about her childhood, other than she was pretty. Um, I guess they didn't have a whole lot, and I don't know how her and my granddaddy met. My grandmother was a very stoic person. She didn't have nearly as much to say, at least around me and to me, until after I was grown. Before I really knew how to have a conversation with my grandmother Sewell. Um, But I remember I loved going to Mama and Papa Sewell's because number one, they had a porch swing, and as long as we didn't tear anything up, we could play on that porch swing, and we loved that porch swing. I think the adults loved us playing on that porch swing because they knew where we were, and we could just entertain ourselves for hours on end on that front porch swing. Um, but like I said, my grandmother was a very stoic person. She didn't read or write. Um, I don't remember this, but I was told this by several different people, including my dad, that my grandmother Sewell, she loved drinking Coca-Cola, and there was where she lived on McConnell Road, which is the only place that I ever knew that my grandmother and granddaddy Sewell lived. Mama would send people across the road to a store right on the curve there. They lived kind of on the inside of the curve, and on the opposite side of the road, right in front of their house, was a little concrete building that was a store, and she would send people over there, and she would buy Cokes. And this is back when I think a Coke was like 6.5 ounces in a bottle. And everybody used a church key or a bottle opener of some kind um, to get it. But my grandmother Sewell, she opened her Coke bottles with her mouth. She would just open it with her teeth. And I was told that when she had her teeth pulled, she lost all her teeth. Uh, she got a set of false teeth. She tried to open a Coke with it, broke her false teeth. She wouldn't wear them anymore. They weren't good enough to open a Coke. She didn't want them. So she did without her false teeth because they couldn't open a Coke bottle. Um, but she was always there. My dad loved her. Uh, I never heard anybody say anything bad about her. Um, my mom told me that my grandmother Sewell used to knit and tat or some other type of crocheting or something. It may have been crocheting or knitting, but she was very good at it. But my grandmother Sewell had arthritis so bad that the last oh 20 years of her life, maybe longer, none of her fingers moved. Well, along about the time I was in the seventh grade or so, grandmother fell and broke her hip. Well, today that's not a joyride, but usually people that break their hip, they can get over it and continue with life. But my grandmother was never able to walk again after she broke her hip. She went to some rehab and stayed there for a while, but she never could. So she was always in a wheelchair or in a bed from then on. And but I think before she fell, she had given up knitting because my mom used to say, well, if Mr. Sewell hadn't have made Miss Sewell give up knitting, she could still use her fingers because She had used her fingers and knit, but she would complain from what, now this is just what I've heard from my mom and dad, but Maw Maw Seawell would knit and then her fingers would hurt her so bad that she just, for I don't know how long, but for a while after her knitting, it just hurt her so bad that she could hardly stand it. So finally, she just gave up knitting. And my mom didn't knit. She crocheted and embroidered by hand, but she did not knit. And she admired my grandmother's work and just always lamented the fact that Miss Sewell had to quit knitting because of her hands. Um, but then when I was in the sixth grade, um, my grandmother and granddaddy celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. And that was a big deal. One Sunday we went down and had they eat out under the big trees there around grandmother and granddaddy's house, and they had a big old cake, and grandmother and granddaddy cut the cake and had pictures made. And I've still got a picture of that day, and I can pick out most of the people. I can still pick out my cousins and all in there. And I remember I'm standing next to Annalise Sewell, which is a first cousin of mine. My uncle Robert, my dad's oldest brother, was his youngest child, and Annalie and I are standing. I think I'm standing right next to Papa, and Annalie's standing next to me. Um, I don't know who arranged everybody, but the whole family is there, and multiple, extended families. A couple of grandmother and granddaddy's children were missing, but most of them were there, and most of the grandkids were there. And it was a really fun day, and it wasn't. I don't know if it was. It seemed like it wasn't a long time. It may have been a year. It could have been 2 years after that anniversary that my grandmother fell and broke her hip. And that's the. I guess that's what happens when you grow up. And um, I don't know if I'm typical or not, but my grandparents, when I was little, they were always there. So I didn't think about them that much. When I went to see them, they were there, and usually uh, we were told go play, and the adults talked. So unless the weather was bad, and we had to sit in there, and then we listened, and that's where I learned so much about my grandparents because I was interested, and I love sitting around and just listening to them tell stories and talk about things. And um, grandmother probably had less to say than anybody else in the house. And I think that was just her personality because Cecil, my pawpaw, he had plenty to say. He was like me. He had plenty to say most of the time. But then not long after, and I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it's a year, 2 years, 6 months, what, but after their 50th wedding anniversary, that's when my grandmother fell and broke her hip and was never able to walk again. So she spent the rest of the time in a wheelchair. And that's really when I got better acquainted with my grandparent. I remember on one occasion, I was dating a girl, and for whatever reason, probably because it was a cheap date, I went down to see my grandmother and granddaddy Sewell. And I got there, grandmother was in the bed. Her hospital bed was in the living room of the house. So I got there, I walked in, there was nobody there except my grandmother. And that concerned me a little bit. But my Aunt Evelyn was out with her fiance. I don't know at the time. There's a man she married eventually, but she was out that night. And I said, "Well, where's Granddaddy?" And she said, "He's across the road playing poker." And I didn't tell this last week. I'm going to tell you about this week. Um, I'm sitting there talking to grandmother, and sitting in Granddaddy's chair, the one that he sat in and played his solitaire and stuff. And my date, and I really don't remember who my date was at the time, but they were sitting across uh, against the wall where the old crank telephone. They had a crank telephone in their house, only one I ever saw in use. That you picked it up and you held the earpiece and you cranked it and you told the operator who you were trying to call. Um, but on that wall after the telephone was moved and they got a desk type phone. Um, there was a chair set there, and my date sat across the room there, and I was sitting in Granddaddy's chair, and Grandmother was to my left, the front door was to my right. And we'd been there a while talking, me asking questions and stuff, and front door opened. It was Papa. And he'd been over there, and he was into his 70s then, and he was mad. He walked in the door. He said, "Dugan, I wish I'd known you were here." And my granddaddy, like I told you last week about him, he was missing his right thumb. He carried his money in his front pocket here. Carried about everything in his front pocket. But anyway, and I told you how serious he was about cards and you didn't cheat in solitaire. My granddad was not a cheater. And somebody had accused him, some old guys about his age, I think, neighbors from around there, would meet over there because by that time that store had closed down. And they just used it on Friday nights or whenever they get together. They would go over and play poker. And he was over there and somebody accused him of cheating. And he wanted to fight. And he wanted me and him to go back over and fight because they had accused him of cheating. So I talked him down from that. But that was another funny incident about my granddaddy Sewell. But sitting there talking to Grandmother while we was there, the one thing I do know about my grandmother and granddaddy both thought that I looked like granddaddy as a teenager. And they had when I was in high school, they had a dance party once a week at a local TV station. And it was on TV from like 5 to 5:30 in the evening or something. And different schools would go. Well, every time my school would go, I would go. I don't know how we were chosen as far as who would dance. I guess the ones that had nerve enough to go would be the ones that would dance. Well, every time I would go, apparently my grandmother and granddaddy Sewell liked watching that because Mom would tell me, "Well, somebody called from down at the Sewells. They saw you on TV last night." And and my grandmother and granddaddy both thought that I looked like granddaddy as a teenager. And I think I look like him as an older man. So, um, but I remember too, I was down there. This was after I was married, and they gave me a picture, or told me I could have a big framed picture of my granddaddy when he was a teenager, and they told me they wanted me to have it. And I made the mistake of saying, um, I'll get it when you guys are through with it. Meaning I didn't want to take it. And it was a big picture. It probably measured 30 inches or more across and almost that high. It was a big, big picture. And that picture was given to somebody else or taken by somebody else after my granddaddy died. So I don't have that picture. I'd really love to have it. I'd love to have it so I could pass it down to. I don't have any sons, but I've got some nephews that still carry that name, and I'd like to be able to. But hopefully, whoever's got it, it'll be passed down through the family, and there'll be a history, and people will know who that picture is. The only thing is, I won't get to tell them that I looked like him when I was a teenager. But some things other than my grandmother didn't read or write, and I think that's one thing that kind of kept her in the distance or in the background. She was satisfied. She had her kids, and she was a good mom. Uh, my dad loved his mom and dad dearly. Um, I remember an incident. My dad told me that one Christmas, remembering these people were sharecroppers, they didn't have hardly anything. Uh, but one Christmas, grandmother told him, my dad said his average, what he could count on for Christmas every year, and most time that was all he got, was a bunch of raisins. And when I say a bunch of raisins, they were still on the vine. They were grapes that had been dehydrated or dried into raisins. and each child got one bunch of grapes. That was their Christmas. But this special Christmas, grandmother told them, and at that time, I don't know how many children was in the family, but tell me what kind of pie or cake you want, and I'll make you your own cake for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
So that Christmas, my grandmother Sewell, my Maw Maw Seawell, she made a cake for all of her kids. Now I don't know if EC or Aunt Evelyn, I don't know how many kids there were at that time, but I'm guessing it. Uncle Robert, Aunt Rowena, and Daddy, Uncle Joe, and Uncle Herb, probably so at least 5 of them. But they all got a cake, and that was a big Christmas for them. That was a big, big Christmas for them because grandmother took the time. And remembering she's cooking on a wood stove, and that was a big Christmas. Grandmother gave them each one their own cake or pie, whatever they wanted her to make. That's what she made for them for Christmas that year. My dad had a special reverence for his mom, and I remember after she broke her leg or broke her hip, and she was um, in the hospital bed for so long and in the wheelchair. She got they used to be, I hadn't seen any in a long time, but there were a little sleeve of, it was a little bank that you slid dimes in. It was just barely big enough to get a dime in, and the opening at the top, I think the top screwed on, but there's an opening where you could slide the dime in the top of the little canister thing, and it would drop down. And I think when you got it full, you had $10. And grandmother knew that. She knew it was $10 when she got it full. So she had that close to her bed. And I remember, um, I don't know, I never heard her outright ask somebody for a dime. But I do know there were occasions where she reminded people that, hey, I got this bank. I'm trying to get it full, trying to get $10 in dimes. Uh, So I don't remember her ever. I know she never asked me because I don't know that I ever had a dime until after I was grown. Um, but she would ask that. Um, she um, was a Medley. Her last name was Medley before she married my granddaddy. And her dad's name was Roe Medley. And Roe Medley, um, I don't know what his uh, genealogy was, but he looked like an Indian. He had the high cheekbones and the nose like an Indian. Now remember, there was a picture of him with a hat on, and he really did look like an Indian. And I was told that they were part Cherokee Indian, but I don't know that there's ever any documentation about whether, where the curly hair and the dark hair came from. I'm not sure where, um, if it we are Cherokee, and I've never had genealogy. I mean, my DNA done. I've had my youngest brother's had his done, and he doesn't show any American Indian in him at all. Yet his oldest daughter, has had hers done, and she does show American Indian. So I don't know how that that DNA works anyway. But I'm glad and I'm proud of the heritage that I've got. Uh, I'm grateful, so grateful, not just for my grandmother Sewell, but both my grandmothers, both my grandfathers, and for all my aunts and uncles for the heritage that I have and the background that I came from. As far as I'm concerned, I tell my kids, I've told my wife, and she agreed, and her family the same. We came from good stock. We didn't come from royalty. We didn't come from wealth. But like in the first poem I ever wrote, if my love was turned to sand, then this world would be all land. And that is where my wealth comes from, is from my family, and for the love that I have for my family and for those that nurtured me, and not only me, those that nurtured my parents, my mom and my dad. Uh, I know they had to have come from good people because they were such good people themselves. Um, I wish I knew more, and hopefully this summer I'll be able to learn more because if I have my way, I'm dealing with some things right now, some health things that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this summer what I wanted to do. But if I'm able to carry out my tentative plans right now for the summer, I'm going to spend a lot more time with two of my cousins that I feel like both of them knew my grandmother Sewell and my granddaddy Sewell better than I did. And I'm looking forward to that time, spending time learning that. And as I do this and tell more stories about my family, I have a few family members that have gotten in touch with me and told me things and tried to straighten me out on things and shared their memories. And I have encouraged them to do the same thing I'm doing, record what they remember about our history and about our family. I'm looking forward to so much more, and I'm getting more and more excited about this, and I hope that you are too. I appreciate your support. Please let me know what I can do better, and just let me know you're there. And I really I'm excited. And before I sign off, I want to tell you to be pretty. Thank you.